Hello, you're watching Smart Money with me, Alishia Seckam. Well, reports of a new investment destination have been emerging over the last few years, especially from within the real estate sector. An increasing number of South Africans are purchasing properties across Mauritius. In fact, the Bank of Mauritius reported that South Africans are the second largest group of real estate investors in the country. Jonathan Tagg, who's projects director at Pam Golding Properties Mauritius, joins us now with more insights. Thanks so much, Jonathan, for your time today. Good to have you with us. Look, settling down in Mauritius certainly sounds idyllic, right? But in what is a global village, why is this becoming an increasingly attractive option for someone who wants to buy property and live outside of South Africa?
Thanks, Alicia. So I think if we look at the different markets at different times, so when I first got here, which was 2007, the predominant market was a retired market. So it was, couples in their sort of early 60s who decided that they wanted a change of life. So they wanted to opt out of city life and they wanted to opt into island life. And up until probably around COVID, that was the majority of the market. And that client did it for two different reasons. One was just to try and find a sort of more peaceful, generally warmer environment to live in. So they would have come from either sort of European cities, in some instances South African cities, and they were looking for an environment which had just been different to what they had, that lived up until that period. And then the second thing for a lot of our clients is they tend to be sort of high net worth, because the island is well positioned, across all sort of pricing spectrums, but there's a lot of real estate from sort of $1 to sort of $10 million. So it's sort of attracting a high net worth individual. And those clients in a lot of instances have come for tax. So Mauritius is created in a tax environment, particularly interesting for Europeans and South African clients in a retired phase who prefer to restructure their financial situation. There are a lot of tax advantages. There's no capital gains tax, no dividends tax. A lot of the investments that they would have would be almost tax-free. And that's, something they look to do. And later down the line, they're looking at the estate planning that might come with the island. What we have noticed since COVID is a much younger group entering the island. So I think as people have become more mobile, Mauritius has kind of moved to that market. They've introduced things like nomad permits, which allow people to come to the island for a year. Then you can renew for a year after that, and they're not taxed on any income that they derive offshore. So we've seen a big influx of people that operate in that space, Bitcoin people or people in tech that can be mobile. And I think that's been a big change for us. If you look around the community now, what was historically maybe a 50s, 60s, 70s, even 80s market, age groups, the clients now, a lot of them in their late 20s, 30s, 40s. So we're seeing a shift, which is interesting. It's nice for the island. And I think that's going to continue as the world kind of changes and people, are afforded, a different sort of lifestyle to the historic sort of city living.
Okay, so you've run us through the demographic of those, most commonly buying properties in Mauritius. You've taken us through some of the motivating factors at play as well. What's the minimum investment required to qualify for, let's talk now, permanent residency in Mauritius? And beyond that, I guess, Jonathan, are there any further requirements that prospective residents would need to fulfill?
So, the residency, if you got to know the residency by property program, which allows you to then become a permanent resident, the minimum investment is $375,000 in a scheme that is designated for foreigners. So there's some guidelines around it, and there's a whole, we can discuss it later, but it's a whole broad offering that is available to the consumer. So $375,000, minimum $375,000. What is interesting, in the last budget, the government introduced a secondary measure to say that if you, for example, spend $750,000, you could apply for two different residencies for two different, let's say, family members, or even two different, friends. That then works on the multiple of $375,000. So if you bought for $1.2 million, you can then have three family members apply for residence. So it could be the father and mother. They could then be their children separately, can get full residency, and they can then get it for their kids who are up to the age of 24 or still dependent. So that was a recent move. We're already seeing a the fact that a lot of people are taking up that option, because I think one of the encumbrances previously is very often parents want to be away from their children or grandchildren. And that's kind of, in a way, has allowed, families that want to move, it's made it far easier.
Yeah. Okay, so that's the price tag. Talk us through the relocation process. I mean, how challenging a process is it? And what are some of the, biggest obstacles one might face?
So I think once you've got the permit, it's very easy. So if you went the property purchase route, once you purchase the property and you've taken title to the property, which is essentially when construction starts, or if it's an end user unit, if it's an existing property, as soon as you take title to the property, you're then able to apply for residency. There's typically sort of a 6 to 9 month process to get the permanent residency. And it's a fairly easy process. It's administrative, but I think if you've got to compare it against other countries and trying to get access to those countries. So if you were to compare it against most European countries, the US or Australia, I think it's far easier. Like if I look at my own situation versus, people that have done the same move but have moved to other countries, I think Mauritius is probably one of the easiest to do.
Okay, so clear those very low hurdles then.
Yeah.
What's the cost of living on that end compared to right here in South Africa?
So I think I would rather talk disposable income. So I think it is more expensive to live on the islands. Property is probably 50% more expensive than South Africa might be. It's probably similar to Cape Town, but if you look at, Johannesburg, Gauteng, KwaZulu-Natal, Mauritius is definitely more expensive on the property side of things. If you go to Cape Town, it's probably quite similar now. But if you look at the sort of day-to-day costs, cost of goods, we're probably about 20 to 30% more expensive than South Africa. However, we are still quite a lot cheaper than what you might find in most sort of major sort of cities, so outside of South Africa, because South Africa is very, very affordable compared to other environments that are similar. However, if you plug in the tax structure to it, so if you were, for example, a retiree, you moved to the island, you took up tax residence, and you had all the tax advantages, your disposable income on the island would be far higher than it might be in another sort of less friendly tax domicile. Then you've got the younger group that are moving out. If they are working off the nomad visas, they have no tax on island. So again, their disposable income might be higher. And if you were employed on the island or you had a company on the island, personal and corporate tax is 15%. So again, it gets down to the disposable income. We may be 15 or 20% more expensive than other relative to South Africa, but factor in the tax and you probably find you've got more disposable income on the island.
Yeah. Okay, so all that said, top tip or bit of advice you'd give any South African interested in getting a Mauritian residency and moving their families over to the country?
So I think the first thing is, you got to tick the Mauritius box. You got to come out, look at the country, find that it suits what you're looking for. I think these things are all about, does the country work for you? Does it provide the kind of services you're looking for? Maybe it's the sport, maybe it's the culture. You got to work that out first. So does Mauritius look like the kind of place that you could live in? So I think you've got to get through that first. I've found that it's been really popular with South Africans, but there's a huge emerging European market that is relocated to the island as well. So it does tick most boxes because it's very weather friendly. You've got a similar lifestyle to South Africa from the point of view it's outdoors, it's coastal, if you live in coastal. So it's kind of a lifestyle that we're used to. It's around beaches, around yacht clubs, boats, that kind of thing. But then there's the more practical stuff. So if you're a young family that's moving out, the first thing you'd want to look at is like, where in Mauritius should I live? And there are 2 or 3 different regions that you could look at on the island. And it's similar to South Africa. It's kind of, some is a little bit more urban, some's a little bit more, not rural, but more nature. So I think that's the second part of it. We generally see people go and look at 2 different areas, Grant Bay in the north, which would be kind of like a sea point in South Africa. It's a more densely developed area, has a lot of services, is very, very popular with the European market that like the outdoor lifestyle, outdoor cafes and bakeries and coffee shops and all that kind of stuff. But Tamarin is another area that's growing very, very quickly as far as the Europeans and South Africans are concerned. And so Grant Bay is on the north side. That's on the southwest side of the island. And I would say that's richer in nature. There you've got the people that like to do trail runs, mountain biking, got a fantastic coastline, great yacht club. And I would say it's kind of got a lot more of a nature feel to it. So I think that's the second thing that people would have to come and look at. That have to say, okay, well, what area do I think is most suitable for us and our family? And then the third thing is you've got to look at the sort of pragmatic stuff of, I've got kids, I need a school, can I get into the schools? As the islands become busier and busier, there are more and more schools going up, but it's not like they may all be available. So you need to come out and look at the school. And the schools are different, from kind of Montessori type schools through to, sort of more what South Africans might be used to in the kind of private school education field. So you'd have to work that out. And then if you're going to be employed on the island, or you're going to require offices on the island, you're going to need to, find out, where is that and how does it look and does it work for you?
Absolutely. So you've got to get through the practicalities, and you've blitzed us through a bit of a tour there. But having said that, and I'm going to allow for a bit of a punt here, Jonathan, you're holding a Mauritius property roadshow in Pretoria, Johannesburg, Durban, and Cape Town. What's that going to be about, and what do attendees have to gain if they choose to come over?
Yeah, so we run a roadshow 1 to 2 times a year in South Africa. The idea is, I'm South African, but I've lived on the island for nearly 18 years. I've got an experience what it is to live on the island, where one should consider living, and the type of lifestyle that you can have in the specific regions. Obviously, a lot of knowledge on the property side of things, but then there's other stuff that people like to understand. Depending on the profile of the client. If it's a younger family, it might be around schools, it might be around sports, maybe around boating if they're enthusiasts. So what do they need there? If they're a more retired couple, it may be around medical, it may be around social networks, card clubs, paddle clubs, golf clubs, what's there for clients. I'm going to be out with another South African, plus I'm going to be out with a lady who I've worked with for about, 13, 14 years, Mauritian, and she brings a different side to it. She's Mauritian, she's lived in Mauritius her whole life. She's very well networked into the foreign community, and there are sometimes questions that they may have for her, on the cultural side of things, or, there's stuff that comes up. So the forum is there, and we'll do specific nights where it will be like a cocktail party. Alternatively, if clients want to plug into a one-on-one appointment, so they feel that they've got stuff that they'd like to share, they'd like it in a more private setting, then we'll be in Johannesburg, we'll go off to Durban, and then we'll be in Cape Town for the final part of it.
So pre-visit to the actual visit when the time comes for those who are considering Mauritius as their next destination in terms of residency down the line. Jonathan, let's leave it there. Thanks so much for having joined us today. Jonathan Tagg is Projects Director at Pam Golding Properties Mauritius.
Thank you, Alishia.